Fondation Jean-Jaurès.
Penser pour agir.
So 20 years ago, the EU offered accession perspectives to the countries of Western Balkans. Since then, the EU has struggled to find the right approach, and it has tentatively revised its accession policy several times. In 2006, with a renewed consensus by setting benchmarks. In 2011, with a new approach introducing front-loading. In 2014, with the Berlin process supposed to bring real additional progress. And in 2021, with a new accession methodology introducing clusters, negative conditionality, and a stronger political steer. But all these revisions have yielded mixed results. To discuss that, today I receive Luka Šterić. Luka, you are a researcher at the Belgrade Centre for Security Policy. And I am Florent Marciacq, director of the Observatory des Balkans at the Fondation Jean-Jaurès. Luka, what is your assessment of these reforms, of these revisions of the accession policy?
Florian, as you said, we have seen many revisions in the last 2 decades. A couple of times we have completely new packaging of the methodology for the assessment. But my view is that these were all kind of repackaging of the same technocratic process, which doesn't really, it didn't really solve the main weaknesses of the process, because actually it has weakened the process in a way because of this constant changes in the methodology and some dubious decisions when it comes to the opening of clusters with the candidate countries has all led to the point of the conditionality, which has been the key aspect of the progress for the countries and the key tool in a way of the European Union to change and to make reforms in the candidate countries. So this conditionality has become kind of negotiable, and it has become a decision of the political decision, but not in a good way, but in a way of allowing stabilocrats in the region to follow this tick-the-box approach, where they would just continue with the easy political decisions, some technical decisions that they can easily make, and then gaining points and retracting the funds instead of really reforming the countries. And it felt as if it was on both sides, both on the side of the Union and on the side of the candidate countries, sometimes a game of we're going to pretend that we give you a clear perspective. We're going to have this technocratic process prolonged for a long time, and on the other side, candidate countries were also kind of we're going to tick some of the boxes, get some of the funds, but not really reform the countries, because this would mean more rule of law, more control over the power, the government, etc. So in that sense, I think it was largely unsuccessful, these kind of changes so far.
Thank you. So technical fixes for political issues, or instead of we have seen on the political side more engagement of some member states, in particular France, in the past 5 or 6 years. In 2016, Paris hosted the Berlin Process Summit. In 2018, it has expanded the intervention mandate of the AfD, the French Development Agency. In 2019, it has, with Germany, initiated intergovernmental dialogue on Kosovo-Serbia issue, and it has also adopted a national strategy for the Western Balkans. In 2022, in June, the French presidency of the Council plans to organize a high-level conference. So there is a feeling that France is re-engaging. What is your assessment of this re-engagement of France in the Western Balkans?
Yes, so we have seen definitely much more active French role in the Balkans, especially since Macron came to the presidency, came to power 5 years ago for the first time. There has been some kind of hope in the Western Balkans. This engagement of France will mean maybe steps further in the accession process. Unfortunately, my assessment is that the French approach was mostly mimicking proactiveness. So in a sense, there were many new initiatives coming from France, but they were all there. The end goal of these initiatives was mostly to kind of have some new technocratic processes, as I said before, to kind of prolong the process, but actually to postpone any new accessions for the foreseeable future. So it doesn't really go anywhere, but you still have some kind of involvement in the Balkans, and which would of course, provide for some kind of stability in the region. Unfortunately, I think it backfired greatly. Unfortunately, we have seen much less stable and much less democratic Western Balkans in the last years. What I'm especially afraid of when it comes to the French role is that, since Angela Merkel stepped down, it seems that Macron has become the new protector of stabilocracy in the region, or the main one actually, who is, collaborating with these corrupt and sometimes even autocratic regimes in the region, especially with the regime in Serbia, to, on one side, have a perfect excuse in Brussels for the debates why the whole region is not going forward with the accession. On the other hand, to have this kind of a role of a main foreign policy player in the region who can, who is controlling the main stability breaker, which is Serbia is seen as such in the EU largely. And finally, to negotiate some lucrative deals with the government in Belgrade. So unfortunately, I think the French role, although it seemed to be much more proactive, it has been the beacon of this stabilocracy, which I think we need to change.
As you presented, we have both an issue on the EU's approach, which is technical and which is trying to, through technical revisions, to hide a little bit a lack of traction, a lack of effectiveness. And we have also an issue on the side of member states, which are not engaged in constructive ways always. What do we do then? What would be your recommendations? We are publishing at the Fondation Jean-Jaurès, at the Observatory des Balkans, policy papers that you have authored. So also giving some suggestions how to maneuver in a better direction. So what would you recommend us to change?
Yeah, so as you said, there has been some very negative developments in the region lately, especially. It's, of course, most of the blame is up to the local political elites, obviously. But the problem is that the EU and some of the member states as well, in their bilateral relations, have actually made a very fertile ground for these kind of changes. So we need, I think, a completely different approach when it comes to the EU policies. But it also eventually comes down to the national level and how the governments will, member states, some of which were the most eager to kind of, stop the process from going any further, including the French role. Unfortunately, there has to be a U-turn in their policies as well. So I think there are three main points when it comes to the engagement of the Union going forward in the Western Balkans. First is that the full, the perspective of full EU membership has to be clear and real and credible. I know it's a kind of a taboo topic in France, especially because it's perceived that the French public is against it. But as it has been, in some of the public polling that we have seen recently, they say that yes, French public is mostly against it, but most of the public is actually, think that it will not affect their personal lives. So maybe in this kind of new geopolitical environment with the war in Ukraine going on, maybe it's a good time to rethink this position and maybe try to influence the public to see it with a different eyes. This is one thing, The other thing is that instead of hiding behind these technocratic processes, which include also these new proposals for the stage accession and for the European policy community, I think we need a clear, strong political commitment that the EU doors are still open for the Balkan states if they reform in a positive way, and not in some distant future, but in a foreseeable future. So something that the people in the Balkans can hold on to, because this is the only tool of soft power the Union has in the region. And nobody wants to be a second-tier citizen, not even in the EU. And the third one, which I think is especially important, is that stabilocracy nor geopolitics in this latest development, those two must not overshadow the rule of law of the EU accession agenda. The rule of law conditionality has to be on the table, has to be very strongly. There has to be strong commitments from the candidate states when it comes to these changes, because this is what the European values were all about. This is what the EU plan and strategy for the peaceful and stable Western Balkans, which would be included in the Union, was from the first place. If we have a reform in these cases, then we'll have a stable Western Balkans, then we have a more democratic Western Balkans, and also the democratic Western Balkans, which would be geopolitically aligned with the Union. So I think these are the three main conditions for a successful policy of the EU in the region.
Thank you very much, Luka. It is a call. It is an interesting call because you're putting forward very much the political vision the EU should have when it's thinking about enlargement, and not the market or the calculation necessities. So it's a matter of priority. It's a matter of visions which the EU needs to set. And not trying to hide a different kind of other agendas. So thanks a lot for sharing this thought. I can encourage all our listeners to download your paper, an excellent paper on the webpage of the Fondation Jean-Jaurès Observatory des Balkans. Thank you, Luka.
Thank you.
Fondation Jean-Jaurès. Penser pour agir.